Lonesome Dove. That's right. I read Lonesome Dove in my 6-month break from my channel, but I'm back and I'm here to talk about it. What's up, guys? Welcome back to 115 Reading. My name is Ethan, and I finished Lonesome Dove a couple of months ago, and I've kind of just been sitting on it and wondering what I could possibly add to the discussion about this book that hasn't already been said. As much as I'd love to continue being on the outlier of the internet opinion and say that this book is hot garbage, I can't say that because I rated the book 5 stars on Goodreads, and I think it's one of the best books I've ever read, so I get to be part of the bandwagon. Fun. As is usually the case, this review is going to be a full spoiler review because I don't like spoiler-free reviews, because I'd like to tell you the things I like or don't like so you actually understand what I'm saying in the review. So full spoilers for Lonesome Dove if you haven't read it. But if you haven't read it, here's your spoiler-free review. Why don't you just go read it, because it's excellent and it's awesome. Shackles off, full spoilers. Let's go. Wow. This book was not what I expected. I'm not really sure what I expected because I haven't really read many Westerns before. I think the only other Western I've read other than this is Shane, which is another book I could maybe talk about. I don't know. Shane is certainly a lot shorter of a book than this. I think that book is like 150 pages, and this book is like, 800. What is this book about? Well, the back of the book will tell you that it's about a group of people going on a cattle drive. And if you look at a lot of the reviews of the book, a lot of the reviews seemingly also focus on the cattle drive and the journey. Look, sure, the cattle drive is like the plot of the book. And it's about these characters that are going on a cattle drive from Texas to like Arkansas or whatever. And that's where like all of the stuff is going to take place, is on this big cattle drive and on this journey. Sure, like that's like what the book is about, but that's not what the book is about. The book is about these two characters right here, all right? Augustus McCrae and Woodrow Call. And it's also a book about disappointment. You've read a book before, right? I'm assuming you have. If you're on a BookTube channel, that means you've probably read some books. So that means you also probably know the basics of character journeys and character arcs, right? We see characters begin at one place, and by the end of the story, they've changed, or the world around them has changed, or both in an ideal world, and we get to explore that. And as you go through Lonesome Dove, you meet a lot of characters besides these two main characters, and they all have this great setup for a great character arc. Call has got this great little arc with his what turns out to be his son, which is Newt, and whether or not he is going to claim Newt as his own, like he hasn't done for years, and admit that he has some kind of dependability or emotions like the other people have. Like he didn't claim the woman that he had a romance with, that is Newt's mother, even though everyone knew that they had feelings for each other. He couldn't claim those feelings or those emotions because he's a stoic guy, right? And so there's this great little setup that like eventually Call is going to claim Newt as his son, and they're going to ride off into the sunset. It's going to be a great little father-son arc. Gus is kind of this happy-go-lucky, really, almost lazy character, and he's got this great little setup with this old romance with Clara, the woman that got away. And because Gus is just such a carefree soul, he let her get away, and he's regretted it ever since. And he wants to go and get her back. But also he's developing this burgeoning romance with this woman named Lorena as well, and maybe like his relationship with Lorena can be like a redemption for how he bungled with Clara, right? A lot of great setups there, and there's a lot more, right? Like July Johnson has a very interesting potential arc that we could get into. We could talk about Elmira, who's like, holy crap, what a hateable character that is, right? But by and large, when you go through each one of these characters, what you'll see is people who have like the setup of this arc and the development of this arc. And for the 800 pages of this book, and all the development they go through, and all the struggles that they go through, and all the hardships they go through, you're waiting to see when it all comes together at the very end, and the characters finally make that step. They finally change, and they become the characters that we know them to be, that we know that they can be. They're going to reach that potential, and they're finally going to complete their character arc, and we're going to ride off into the sunset, and we're going to walk away with some of the greatest characters in fiction. But that's not what happens, and that's why this book is about disappointment, because when you get to the final 150 pages, what you realize this book is actually about is characters who will never actually change and will deny every opportunity that comes their way to become really better people and to become, the best people that they can be. We see this one by one with almost all these characters, right? Elmira, doesn't have any kind of change of heart, doesn't realize how heartless she is, and she continues to run away and ends up getting killed, and the people around her killed. July Johnson, right, could finally step up and be the father to his son, but instead, just like what happened with Elmira, he just falls head over heels for Clara and also doesn't accept his son in his life and continues being the clueless, oblivious, kind of lame, wet blanket guy that he started the book as. Call never claims Newt as his son, even though he has a golden opportunity to at the very end of the book, and instead, brings Gus's body back down to Lonesome Dove at the very end of the book and ends up right where he started, and is also the reason all this stuff happened to begin with, and nothing about him changes by the end. He's still the stoic, emotionless self who won't claim anybody, not even Gus, really, by the end. Gus has the opportunity to finally settle down with Clara or with Lorena and build a life with her, at her little ranch. Everybody would have a better life for that, but he doesn't, because Gus is actually kind of a selfish person, and he's just too carefree, and he's too adventurous, and he doesn't want to say goodbye to his lifestyle that he's always lived, and so he rides off to finish the adventure. The excuse he gives is that he gave his word, or he has to finish what he started, which we all know is bullcrap. He could decide to leave the cattle drive. He didn't want to do the cattle drive anyway, and he could have stayed with Claire if he wanted to, but he didn't really want Claire, right? He wanted the adventurous lifestyle. And what does that do? What does that cost him in the end? Well, it costs him his life, and it doesn't just cost him his life. It's going to, I'm not going to say ruin, but it's going to negatively affect everybody else's lives around him. It negatively affects Clara, Lorena, who's come to depend on him. It negatively affects Call, right, who abandons Newt and the rest of the gang to bring his body down to Lonesome Dove out of a weird sense of obligation. And so what we have here is a bunch of characters who disappoint you. That's what Lonesome Dove is about, right? In many ways, this kind of reminds me of how I felt finishing the original First Law trilogy for the first time, because that's kind of what hit me about The Last Argument of Kings back when I reviewed those, if you recall my videos about First Law, is that those books are also about characters who look like they're going to change and then they don't, right? And that's what happens in Lonesome Dove. And so this is a book about disappointments. That's why it's so emotionally effective, right? Because what's really hard about this is that all these characters are super likable, right? Gus is really likable. Call is really likable. Elmira is... Elmira is Elmira. Clara, Lorena, super likable. All these characters are really likable, and not only can they change, but a lot of the choices that they end up making, it just leads to the death of people around them as well, right? Because even this cattle drive, right, which some would see as this big romantic epic adventure, the cattle drive itself is also disappointing because it's not a big fun adventure. It's a journey that is plagued with hardship and struggle and constant death through the entire book. So many characters die in this book due to the choice of Gus and Call wanting to go on one last adventure. And as the journey goes on, that just becomes ever clearer with each death and with each betrayal and with each death, right? These characters keep coming into contact with the reality that their adventurous lifestyle is not what they think it is, what they want it to be, what they hoped it would be. They didn't accomplish in their lives what they wanted to accomplish or have the effect that they wanted to have. And so there's so many opportunities through this where they could just say, hey, you know what? We could just not do this, right? Like, we don't have to do this. We could just actually stop and have a better life. We could actually, one, make sure people aren't dying around us, but two, improve our lives and the lives of people around us. But they don't do it because these characters are stubborn or they're selfish. They're very human, right? It's a really sad story because these characters are so disappointing in a way, and they just continue to disappoint you chapter after chapter after chapter. Like, this is pitched as a story between two best friends, right? And a relationship about how great friendship is and all that good stuff. But I think we learn even the relationship between Call and Gus itself is not like this beautiful standard of friendship that you might be led to believe it is. And I think you can tell that from this quote right here. This is Clara talking to Call at the very end. And I'll tell you another thing. I'm sorry you and Gus McCrae ever met. All you two done was ruin one another, not to mention those close to you. Another reason I didn't marry him was because I didn't want to fight you for him every day of my life. You men and your promises, they're just excuses to do what you plan to do anyway, which is leave. You think you've always done right? That's your ugly pride, Mr. Call. But you never did right, and it would be a sad woman that needed anything from you. You're a vain coward for all your fighting. I despised you then for what you were, and I despise you now for what you're doing. That's the reality of these characters. That's the reality of these characters' friendships. That's the reality of these characters' decisions. They were bad for one another. They ruined one another. They ruined one another and the lives of the people close to them. And for what? Some cattle drive? Some last adventure? Some sense of obligation? That's the reality of Lonesome Dove. This is a book that is exciting and funny and human and all those great adjectives we use to describe books, but primarily it's a book about disappointments. It's about the disappointment of the myth of the Wild West. It's about the disappointment of these two characters. It's about the disappointment of this lifestyle, of this journey, of this time period. It's all very disappointing, but it's no less compelling for it. I suppose I should also take this time to review the very popular miniseries adaptation of Lonesome Dove, which I watched right after finishing the series, and I think it's fitting that Lonesome Dove is a book about disappointments because the miniseries is so disappointing, but not for like the good reasons that the book is disappointing, for like the bad reasons, because it's actually kind of like a bad miniseries. And look, I get it that this series was iconic when it came out, and I get that the two actors for the two leads are really great fits for the roles, and they did really good. But I'm here to tell you that like everything else about that miniseries adaptation mostly kind of sucks, and if anything deserves to actually be remade nowadays amongst all the remakes, I think Lonesome Dove should get a 2-part movie remake or something at least, because holy cow, that miniseries is so sauceless. I mean, it's a made-for-TV thing, so of course like it's not going to look as good as movies, but it really looks pretty cheap in most of it. And yeah, Tommy Lee Jones and Robert Duvall are great picks for Gus and Call. They're so good in that series, obviously. But the acting from everybody else is so hit or miss. I shouldn't be laughing at the section with Blue Duck and Lorena, but I am, because the actor for Blue Duck is so bad in this series, and because it's a made-for-TV thing, the series is not allowed to get dark or violent like this section of the book warrants, and so this comes away feeling like a story for children, which is not what Lonesome Dove should be about. And it's really sad, right? Because clearly what the miniseries proves is that there is a good adaptation somewhere in this story. Like, this story deserves to be, adapted and shown on the big screen, but it shouldn't be made for TV, and it should be a big movie, and it should have like a really good director behind it who, can give it the cinematic flair that it deserves, because man, the miniseries, it just ain't it. Sure, the last episode is the best one, and it's pretty good, and it makes up for a lot. But man, by and large, that miniseries was so disappointing. So that's it for Lonesome Dove, a book about disappointments. It was not what I expected, but it's kind of what I needed to read, and it emotionally impacted me, and it just left me empty inside after finishing it. And it definitely brought out some tears in some scenes. I mean, I didn't even talk about the whole Jake Spoon subplot. Holy cow, that chapter was so depressing. It is some of the best characters you'll ever read in a book. Just full stop. And I didn't even talk about all the characters that are in here because there's so many great side characters that we could talk about. And it's just basically, it's a perfect book. Guys, really enjoyed talking about Lonesome Dove. Up next, coming up soon, we're going to be talking about the Fitz and the Fool trilogy, the final trilogy in the Realm of the Eldlings. I'm really excited about it. Until next time, guys. See ya.